Hi everyone and welcome to this week's EBC. We're at Spring Lake Park Reserve this week. We're here because I was thinking about this great big lake that's down here on the Mississippi River that's down this steep bank, because we're going to be talking about Luke 8 verses 26 to 39, and it's a story in which a whole herd of pigs go tumbling over a steep bank into the water and drown. But there's a lot more to the story, and in fact some things that we're going to focus on as being a lot more important than that part of the story. But let's start first with what's happening. Jesus has arrived in a town, and he finds a man who's been suffering from demons. And in fact, it says he's got a lot of demons in him, and the townspeople know that they're just chaining him up at night. They're dealing with him because he's just completely uncontrollable. But when Jesus arrives, the demons recognize Jesus for who he is. They call out that he's the Son of God. And Jesus casts the demons out of the man. And then the demons essentially are begging, like, please don't just send us back to the abyss. And they ask permission, oddly enough, to go into a herd of pigs. And when they go into the herd of pigs, the pigs stampede. They go over the side of the bank into the water and drown. And then the townspeople, having seen what happened, come to Jesus and say they're afraid. But what they see that's making them afraid isn't necessarily the pigs having run over the bank and drowned. What they're saying is making them afraid is that this man that they've always known as this completely unsafe, crazed individual is suddenly calm and clothed and with Jesus. And they want Jesus to leave. And the man says, Jesus, let me come with you. And Jesus says, no, don't come with me, but go and tell all the people in the town what God has done for you. Now that's the story. And if you were going to tell that story back to some other people, what is the thing you remember the absolute most about that story? It's the pigs running off the bank into the lake and drowning. And in fact, there have been times when folks dissect this particular story sort of with all sense of kind of weird morality questions like, what about the pigs? What about the lake? Were any of those things good things to do? Why would Jesus allow these demons into these pigs? And I want to pause for just a moment. Because even before social media existed, we had a tendency to grab on to the sensationalist part of a story. And then say, hey, this is what the story is all about. And of course, now, today, with sort of headlines, everywhere in social media, we tend to grab on to those attractive, sensationalist headlines. But I want to focus for a moment on what Jesus is telling us is important in this story. Jesus tells the man who would rather go and follow Jesus, don't follow. Tell everyone what's happened. This story is not about the conversation with the demons. It's not about the pigs jumping off into the lake. It's about Jesus simply healing a man who needed his help. So as we're thinking about this story, I want to focus on one other aspect, that Jesus actually commanded the man to go tell everyone, and that's in contrast to a lot of other places in the Bible, but places in Luke itself. Just a few chapters earlier in chapter 5, Jesus heals a leper and then says to the leper, don't tell anyone what I've done. Go show yourself to the priest because you must, but don't tell anyone what I've done. And a few chapters later, or one more chapter later in chapter 9, Peter has identified that Jesus is the Son of Man, and Jesus says, don't tell anyone right now. I've got to go die and be raised from the dead before we should be saying that to anybody. But in this instance, Jesus is super clear. Go tell everyone what God has done for you, he says to the man. And I think that's a lesson for us to realize that in the face of all of the sensationalism that was the demons and the pigs and running off into the lake, the real story, the real thing to focus on is simply Jesus loving and healing those in need. So everyone, have a ton of confidence this week that if you are one of those people in need of some love and healing from Jesus, He's already focused on you, and you can be focused on him. Have a great week.